Imagine being so powerful that you could bend the land, the lives of thousands, and even time itself to your will. That was King Louis XIV of France, known as the Sun King, a man who didn't just rule a country, but tried to mold reality itself into a mirror of his own glory. His grandest project, the Palace of Versailles, wasn't just a royal residence. It was a weapon of control, a theater of dominance, and, most fascinating of all, an attempt to cheat time, to carve an eternal legacy into stone, gold, and perfectly manicured gardens. Louis XIV became king at just 5 years old, but it wasn't until his early 20s that he decided one crown wasn't enough. He wanted to be a god on earth. His symbol? The sun. Not by coincidence. Just as the planets revolved around the sun, so too would his court revolve around him. And to make sure of that, he needed a new center of gravity. So he set his sights on a quiet hunting lodge in a swampy village called Versailles. Now, transforming a hunting shack into a palace might sound ambitious, but Louis had more in mind. He would build the most dazzling royal court in the world, so radiant, so overwhelming in beauty and discipline, that no one could look away. Construction began in the 1660s, and what followed was a spectacle of obsession. Tens of thousands of workers toiled day and night. Entire forests were flattened, swamps were drained, streams were redirected, and over the next 50 years, Versailles became the beating heart of a monarchy that wanted to seem immortal. But Louis didn't build Versailles just to show off. No, he built it to trap the nobility brilliantly. The palace became the golden cage of the French elite. Louis demanded they live there, under his ever-watchful eye. He controlled their access to power, wealth, and even his attention. The nobles were too busy competing over meaningless honors, like who got to hand the king his gloves, to plot rebellion. This was political theater at its finest. Versailles was a machine that ran on rituals, etiquette, and flattery. Every mirror in the Hall of Mirrors reflected not just the king's image, but his absolute authority. And then there were the gardens. Oh, the gardens! They weren't just for beauty, they were propaganda. Perfect symmetry, endless paths, fountains timed to erupt as the king approached. Nature itself was tamed, shaped into order. Louis wanted to show that chaos had no place in his world. Even time bent to his will. The sun rose and set on his schedule. Meals, dances, hunts, plays, all timed to perfection, all choreographed like clockwork. He didn't just live in Versailles, he orchestrated it, like a divine composer writing an eternal symphony. But beneath the glitter, the strain was enormous. Versailles drained the treasury. Wars bled the nation. The king taxed the poor to pay for opulence, and famine gnawed at the countryside. Yet inside the palace, it was always the 17th century's version of Instagram, an illusion of perfection. And that's exactly what Louis wanted. If Versailles looked eternal, maybe his reign would never end. Maybe he could conquer not just Europe, but oblivion. Louis XIV ruled for 72 years, the longest reign in European history. When he finally died in 1715, he had lived through 5 decades of Versailles construction, transforming it from a swamp into a jewel. But even in death, he tried to control the narrative. His will laid out exact instructions for how France should continue, though his successors ignored most of it. The grandeur he left behind, however, could not be ignored. Versailles stood as a monument to one man's will, a warning, a wonder, a trap for time itself. Ironically, Louis's attempt to stop time had the opposite effect. By freezing France in a golden age of his own making, he unintentionally delayed reforms, ignited resentment, and laid the groundwork for revolution. A century later, the very nobles who had once bowed to his every whim were dragged from palaces by angry mobs. The Sun King had built a world too perfect, too rigid, and eventually it shattered. But here's the twist. Even after all that, after the guillotine, the republics, the wars, Versailles remains. Millions walk its halls every year. Tour guides whisper stories of royal gossip and ghostly glories. The gardens bloom, the fountains dance. Louis XIV is long gone, but in a way, he won. He didn't stop time. but he sure as hell made it pause and look back. So the next time you see a picture of Versailles, remember, it's more than a palace. It's a message from a man who believed that power, beauty, and legacy could hold back the sands of time. And for just a moment, they did.